Jason, Bloomberg, thank you so much for joining us here. Welcome to Las Vegas in BlockShow North America. You just came off the stage, and for those who don't know of you, can you please tell us a few things, a few organizations you're with, and your position on blockchain and crypto?
Okay, well, I'm president of Intellyx, and Intellyx is an industry analyst firm focused on what we call Agile Digital Transformation.
Can you explain, I'm sorry, Can you explain for the viewers that may not be that well versed with Agile Digital Transformation, what does that mean?
So essentially, our audience are people at large companies, and we help them understand how all of the various disruptive trends in enterprise technology support their business transformation goals. So many big companies are in the process of transforming. We call that digital transformation, leveraging technology to better serve their customers. And so within the context of blockchain, that is now one of these many trends. So blockchain is one trend we cover. We cover artificial intelligence, cloud computing, big data, Internet of Things. There's quite a number of disruptive trends.
I think you just covered every buzzword in the universe right now.
It's buzzwords that apply to enterprise technology.
Okay.
Right, exactly. And we help now debuzzify them and make it clear what's really going on so that the audience understands.
Do you own that debuzzify?
That's what we do.
we debuzzify you.
Right.
Have you found that in vetting these new disruptive technologies that there aren't a lot of true applications for blockchain technologies in some of these new solutions?
Well, you mentioned buzzwords, and that happens with any of these, right? You have some sort of new technology trend, just getting started, not a lot of solutions, just people working out the technology. There's some sort of name for it that now catches the attention of everybody, and everybody starts talking about blockchain this, blockchain that, even though the technology really isn't ready for prime time yet. And that's been the case for blockchain for quite a while now. It's been around for, about a decade now, and only now are we seeing some of the early successes beyond the cryptocurrency, essentially proof of concept. And so this is why I came to this conference, not to poke holes and be the skeptic, although that's a lot of fun and I think it's important, but really to find those enterprise blockchain stories, even though they're just getting started, that may bring real value to companies.
So correct me if I'm wrong, so you're looking for those guys that have overcome those hurdles, right? And even though you consider yourself a skeptic, you're still looking for those cherries inside this world. As we know that in the last 6 months, almost 60% of the ICOs have failed or haven't been able to produce a product. But you still have faith in blockchain as a technology.
Well, I'm only a skeptic because there has been so much nonsense. And so
that's good to clarify, right?
So much BS, and that's happened with other trends as well. I remember being a cloud skeptic back in the mid-2000s, and then when cloud matured to a certain point, now I'm a cloud fan, right? But in the early days, it was the same kind of nonsense. So it's really about looking for the appropriate maturation of the technology to the point that companies can actually create solutions that solve real business problems outside of just serving other people within the blockchain community, what I like to call the blockchain echo chamber. So you see a lot of that here, where there's companies with business models that serve other companies here. So there are one blockchain company serving another, or one blockchain or crypto company serving another. And if that's all you're doing, then the money's going to run out. Right? Because you have to bring in money from other companies, from other people outside the community in order to build a growing ecosystem.
And to your point, I look at that, and do you feel that we're in the stage, in this early stage of blockchain where we need that level of growth, where we need smaller companies to build cogs between each other to create the overall offering for a better service?
Well, I mean, anytime there's a new technology trend, whether it was cloud computing or the internet or whatever the trend is, you will build an ecosystem of players that now leverage each other to provide greater value. I think what's happened in the blockchain community is it's gotten a bit ahead of itself. That is, we have so much attention and so much speculative money going into the space through ICOs primarily, but also through crypto investments, that people have gotten they've gotten a false sense of security that there's some real business value here where there isn't nearly as much value as people would expect. So yes, people can make money with crypto, they can make money with blockchain today because there is this speculative money coming in, but that's not the same thing as providing real value to customers. And you can't build a viable business unless you provide real value to customers.
So you're not negative on crypto? You're
yes,
negative on...
Well, I'm negative on permissionless blockchain-based solutions, of which most crypto is, not all of it, but most of it is permissionless. And the problem with permissionless is that anybody can be a miner. A miner is a transaction processor for the cryptocurrency. And if anybody can be a transaction processor, that means criminals can. Now, not every miner is a criminal, but criminals are welcome to be miners, and as a result, many of them are. And organized crime has taken notice and is now moving into the cryptocurrency world, both to leverage the advantages of mining, so the direct revenue that can be generated, the power that being a miner has over the cryptocurrency itself, especially as you
Now you're saying they're going to use this in a negative way, or you saying, because the first point you made was that anyone can become a miner.
Anyone can become a miner.
That doesn't seem like such a negative, even if you have a jaded past or not. How do you use that information?
Well, if anybody can become a miner, then criminals can become a miner, but keep in mind that mining is essentially the current term for processing cryptocurrency transactions.
Do they have the ability to?
So now we have this cryptocurrency transaction processor, right? In the world of fiat currencies, right, like the US dollar, transaction processors are banks and other trusted, regulated institutions. And now we're opening that up to anybody, including Russian or Chinese crime syndicates.
But are we
trusting them to process our transactions?
The network, not the individual mind? We're not trusting that. Let's just say criminal. We're just gonna, just for argument's sake, we're gonna have this conversation. We're not trusting necessarily them. We're trusting the entire network to put what he's processing on the network. Excuse me, and for that to be valid. Correct? There's no way that they can.
From the perspective of the user, so, somebody who is buying or selling Bitcoin, say. Every time they conduct a transaction, they are putting in the money in the pockets of criminals. Right? And that is, in my book, unethical. Right? To do something that puts money into the pockets of criminals. It may not be a crime in and of itself,
I understand,
but it may be unethical. So when we start thinking about business applications, well, now the lack of ethics can become a real problem. Because how would a Wall Street investor, right, deal with cryptocurrency if they're putting money in the pockets of criminals when they have, basically committed to ethical behavior in the workplace, right? So now it's a real problem.
So some would say that the big banks, Wall Street, are unethical themselves in what they've been able to get away with the speculation in the past few years.
Well, that's actually a fallacious argument.
Good. Okay.
And the fallacious argument is, the inappropriate, correspondence argument, right? Where you're saying, well, there may be criminal activity over here, but there's criminal activity over there, and why should we care about it over here? Well, it's irrelevant. It's like saying, if you're stopped for speeding, for going 70 to 55, and you tell the cop, but other people were speeding as well. Do you think the cop is going to let you off because of that argument? No, of course not.
It doesn't matter. One time.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that other people are speeding, or even if other people are even faster than you. The fact is, the cop caught you speeding, and you were guilty. You're getting a ticket. Right? Irrelevant that other people are committing other crimes. Right? This is a very common fallacy, though, within the cryptocurrency circles. They're looking at fiat. They say, well, criminals can use fiat. Obviously, criminals have been using cash since the dawn of time. Right? 5,000 years.
All day.
And now along comes cryptocurrency, and criminals are getting into that as well. It's like, well, but criminals use dollars as well. That's irrelevant. That's entirely irrelevant. Now, if somebody came along and said, well, here's a blockchain solution that will prevent criminals from using dollars for committing crimes, now you'd have something. Well, nobody's inventing that.
Well, the anonymity, right? How are we getting? It's all this free engagement without any third-party intermediary. KYC, AML. So then now you're on the opposite of free trade, a free economy, a free system, and there's risks with that.
Well, anonymity is an interesting thing because on the plus side, anonymity can be very important. Say, if you're in a repressed regime and you want to have communication among resistors to that regime, then anonymity can protect them from the the forces of their repressive government. So there's a role for anonymity, but in large part, anonymity is primarily of benefit to criminals who don't want to be caught, right? So Bitcoin is not sufficiently anonymous. There are ways, if law enforcement is particularly astute, to track down Bitcoin transaction participants. So that is why cryptocurrencies like Monero are so popular. So if you look at some of the primary criminal activities that are leveraged cryptocurrency today, like cryptojacking, this is illicit crypto mining, it's Monero is the favored currency over Bitcoin. Bitcoin was more popular for ransomware, but that's 2017. Now it's cryptojacking and Monero.
So now let's look at apples to apples. We look at fiat, we look at the rate that criminals are involved, we're looking at crypto, we're looking at the rate that criminals are involved.
That's what I'm saying, is those not apples to apples, right? They're very different things.
Let's take them in their infancy, right? Let's take them in their infancy and their stages. We have to look at the world of blockchain and crypto. I'd like to look at the world in blockchain and crypto as almost the Diners Club, right? American Express, early days. It's there. We're going to move on from criminals and we're going to move into an ecosystem.
Okay.
Right? It's there. It can be used at certain areas, not widely accepted, still some challenges. Do you feel that that's an accurate analogy at where the world of crypto is to the payment systems of American Express Diners Club back then? And do they have the same challenges to overcome?
Well, if you look at American Express, Diners Club, or if you look at loyalty programs like airline frequent flyer miles, et cetera, those ecosystems are hub and spoke ecosystems, right? That is, there is some sort of central entity, American Express say, who is now able to foster and build an ecosystem that leverages American Express. And ecosystems are very powerful in many different contexts. You have Apple with their iPhone ecosystem, you have Google with their Android ecosystem, but ecosystems are hugely beneficial to those hubs, the central company that drives ecosystem. There are also quite a bit of benefit to all of the participants in the ecosystem because they get, they get benefits based upon the size of the ecosystem. Traditionally though, ecosystems are hub and spoke. They're centralized, they're some sort of central participant. What people are trying to do with cryptocurrency and permissionless blockchain is build decentralized ecosystems.
Let's compare those.
Those have problems that people haven't really worked through.
Do you think they can though?
It's possible.
Because we're so early, and I don't want to stifle I'm an innovator, product developer by trade, So when I see us so early, I've got a wooden wheel. That'll never work. You're crazy.
Right,
it's going to break.
First iteration.
Exactly.
Well, if you look at some of the decentralized ecosystems that blockchain companies are attempting to foster, one of the key problems they have is that the company trying to build this ecosystem is not going to make a lot of money doing it.
Right.
Because, Amex makes a lot of money for their ecosystem because they're running the show. Right. But these companies are building decentralized ecosystems, are at best just one of many participants, or maybe they're consulting, consulting firms that can provide solutions to other participants. But they're not the ones who are running the show. But you still need some entity.
No one's running the show, right?
Well, nobody's running the show except that you still need to have some sort of coordinating effort, which is usually now the role of a consortium. Okay. So consortium-based ecosystems are essentially the alternative to centralized ecosystem. They're still centralized in the sense that there's a consortium. Right. That is, many of the participants get together and build consensus, right? Exactly. So it's a consensus-based ecosystem, but that consortium now has to have legs. That is, it has to have sufficient credibility in order to drive the ecosystem. So Deloitte, for example, is working with an insurance company consortium that existed before blockchain came along. They were doing a lot of training, for certification for insurance companies, right? So that made sense. Insurance companies, they're competitors. They can only collaborate on certain things, but by law. But they can basically say, okay, here's how the industry is going to handle certifications, and come up with a consortium that certifies people. Okay, so now that consortium is now also coming up with tokens for the industry, and that may fly because it's now a distributed ecosystem. But Deloitte, they're a consulting firm. They're not making money because they're startups. starting the consortium. The consortium is a non-profit that existed beforehand.
Right.
They're just making money providing consulting services,
Okay.
right? But a lot of these startups who are trying to foster consortiums, they just don't have a good way to make money.
Right.
So
They come to you at this point. Are they looking at you? Are they looking?
We might write about them. That's all we do, right?
Because
might help them with their marketing. That's all we do.
Yeah, because I look at where you sit in our world, and you hold as a critic, as a valid skeptic, you hold almost a certain level of knowledge where you can build a cog or help these companies build a cog. So in those industries, in blockchain, where do you see the most influential industries that need someone to build a cog? So
Okay.
is it
that's a good question. So there are some early killer apps, you could say, for blockchain. And those are situations where there are multiple participants involved in complex transactions. So, for instance, supply chain transactions or logistics transactions. Right. So on the supply chain side, I talked to, a little while back, the fellow who's heading up food safety for Walmart. So Walmart and IBM are working together along with a number of other players, packaged goods manufacturers and other players, to come up with a blockchain-based food safety system that will better track food from the field to the table, so primarily produce and other things, because that is a flawed system that we have currently.
Right.
And blockchain could very well help address that problem. But it is still a question as to who's going to run the show. Is it going to be IBM? Well, it's Hyperledger based, so it's permissioned, right? So it's going to be some sort of consortium, and IBM will participate. Walmart, being the largest retailer in the ecosystem, is going to be a dominant player, but obviously Nestle and Unilever, a bunch of other players as well, who are very large companies, can foster an ecosystem, and this could very well be an important solution to the food safety supply chain problem that, because it's always had multiple players, has never had a good solution before. Or the other one that also involves IBM is their partnership with Maersk. Maersk, M-A-E-R-S-K, international logistics provider. They do the container ships and the trucks and all this stuff. And international logistics involves multiple parties.
Right.
There's not just the buyers and sellers of the goods and the transporters of the goods, there's all the customs and everything else.
Absolutely.
Lots of paperwork, and there's a lot of paperwork involving multiple parties. That's when blockchain can be especially useful. So if you have a situation with lots of paperwork involving multiple parties, where you have these complex transactions that often take a lot of time for transactions to settle, that is a great use case. So whether there's really much opportunity beyond those killer apps, that remains to be seen.
All right, well, let's see what those opportunities are. I'd love to talk to you a little bit further when you get a chance, and let's talk about some of those sectors that could benefit from those cogs. And I appreciate you and the time that you're taking with me.
Yeah, happy to join you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
All right.